The film begins by introducing us to a guy named Sean. He's in Juarez, Mexico, searching for his daughter, Lee. A little while back, Lee sneaked off with her friend to catch a music concert without telling anyone. But since then, neither Lee nor her friend has come back. Sean has this feeling that the folks in Juarez might have taken them, because that place is notorious for being super dangerous. His hunch got stronger when he stumbled upon Lee's car and glasses at a used car lot. So, Sean did the right thing and told the local cops about what he found. But when he went back to that spot, Lee's car had vanished into thin air. The police didn't really buy Sean's story, and they even thought maybe Lee's friend was behind all this. Still, they promised to give Sean a shout if they learned anything new. In the meantime, they told him it was best for him to hightail it back to the United States, because Juarez was just too risky for a foreigner like him. In the end, Sean had no choice but to head back home empty-handed, without a single lead on where Lee might be. Oh, by the way, when he's not chasing after missing kids, Sean's a big shot in the cattle and horse breeding business, living out in the boonies along the US-Mexico border, and he's got a huge chunk of land to his name. When Sean got back home, he had to break the news to his wife, Susan, that he hadn't uncovered any hints about where Lee might be. There he tried to reassure her, so she wouldn't stress out too much. Meanwhile, their younger daughter, Lauren, seemed kind of let down that Sean couldn't find her sister. Sean, being a dad, felt pretty disappointed in himself too, like he should have been a better protector for Lee. But honestly, he was at a loss about what to do next, and he was pretty convinced that the Juarez police were mixed up in his daughter's disappearance. The next day, Sean had his buddy Max to come to his place. Max used to be a hotshot in the United States Special Forces. Turns out Sean, despite looking like a regular guy who raises animals, was once the top dog in the Special Forces himself. You can tell by the US Special Forces flag flying outside his house. Not only that, but Sean was Max's boss back when they were military buddies. They spent years doing some intense combat stuff until they decided to ditch it and become cattle breeders. So they sat on Sean's porch, trying to figure out how to find Lee and her friend. At first, Max suggested some pretty hardcore tactics to Sean, but he wasn't keen on using violence, not until he knew who had taken his daughter. After linking up with Max, Sean headed to the United States Embassy in Mexico to dig up more info about the shady stuff happening in Juarez. At that time, Sean didn't go solo. He had the other girl's dad with him. Soon after, embassy folks spilled the beans that there were loads of American folks who went missing while passing through Juarez. Usually, they got nabbed by this mega-powerful gang running the show in the city. So, it seemed like Lee and her buddy might have faced the same fate. This gang wasn't just into the drug trade, cause they also dabbled in human trafficking. And they had this heavily armed group that's basically like a military force, known as Los Mercenarios, which translates to mercenaries in Spanish. But here's the kicker. The embassy people weren't too keen on helping Sean dig into his daughter's kidnapping. They seemed totally defeated and wanted nothing to do with the gang. That really ticked Sean off and left him feeling super frustrated. So he decided to bail on their office. But right as he was leaving, he spotted a news story about Los Mercenarios, how they'd gone on a brutal rampage, taking out everyone in their path, including innocent folks. Even worse, both the Mexican and US governments were too scared to step in and stop them. Then, after catching wind of the news, Sean and Susan decided to bring in journalists to report on their daughter's kidnapping. They hoped this would spread the word and get more people involved. The news kept spreading until it reached the ears of the big boss of the Los Mercenarios gang, a guy named Garcia. He found out that Sean was a highly respected ex-Special Forces officer from the United States. At that time, Garcia was pretty sure that Sean would come after his gang sooner or later. So, Garcia ordered his crew to track down the folks behind Lee and her friend's kidnapping. To everyone's surprise, it turned out that the ones who kidnapped Lee and her friend were those corrupt cops we saw at the start of the movie. Those two officers had snatched the girls as gifts for the Los Mercenarios gang, but this time they had picked the wrong targets, and that put the gang in serious danger. Soon after, Garcia ordered his guys to take care of those two cops. One of them, a cop named Montoya, kept begging for forgiveness and promised to make amends. Hearing this, Garcia gave Montoya another chance. Then, Garcia got in touch with his little brother, Carlos, who happened to be the most ruthless warlord in the Los Mercenarios gang. Carlos was always Garcia's right-hand man when it came to dealing with gang wars. Then, Garcia told Carlos to go after Sean and his family. Garcia wanted to send a message to everyone that his gang was as tough as they come. The next morning, Sean got up early to feed his favorite horse, but from a distance, he spotted a coyote heading towards his farm area. Now, if he left that stray dog alone, it would cause trouble for his livestock. So, Sean grabbed his rifle to take a shot at the wild dog. At the same time, Carlos and his crew had crossed over the border between the United States and Mexico. They were all geared up in bulletproof vests and had some heavy-duty weapons. Just as Sean was aiming at the coyote, he spotted Carlos' crew getting closer. In a hurry, Sean warned Susan and Lauren to seek shelter inside the house while he stood his ground against the attackers. The clash kicked off as soon as Carlos and his crew reached Sean's house. While defending against Carlos' crew, Sean told Susan to call the police ASAP. At first, they had trouble because Carlos was using a signal jamming device. Luckily, they managed to get through to the nearest police. Their call was answered by a cop named James, who happened to be patrolling nearby. Meanwhile, Carlos' crew began to encircle Sean's house from all sides. They even tried to force their way through the front door, but Sean's defense was holding strong, though as time passed, he was running low on options. In the end, Sean decided to lead Carlos and his gang into his house voluntarily. Not long after, one of Carlos' guys questioned why they hadn't attacked yet, even though they were facing just one opponent. There, Carlos explained that he didn't want to be careless because they were dealing with the toughest former U.S. Special Forces, and Sean had survived for decades in the military world. That meant Sean was super tough and shouldn't be underestimated. Carlos then ordered his men to enter Sean's house one by one, spreading out throughout the place. Carlos' crew thought they were hunting Sean, but it turned out to be the other way around. Sean moved like a ghost, silently taking them out one by one without revealing himself. At that time, Carlos looked pretty frustrated as his numbers dwindled. Finally, Carlos entered the house with all his remaining troops, including Montoya, the crooked cop. They tried to provoke Sean to come out of hiding, but Sean didn't fall for Carlos' tricky tactics. Instead, Sean went on the offensive, striking Carlos and his gang first. Shortly after, a fierce shootout erupted inside Sean's house, and many of Carlos' men met their end at the hands of Sean. Witnessing this, Carlos' crew panicked and felt terrified. Even Montoya, who was hiding behind a wall, couldn't escape the fear. But Carlos didn't like his men acting like cowards, so he ordered Montoya to go find Sean. Surprisingly, Sean suddenly appeared and aimed his gun at Montoya's head. Around the same time, James arrived at Sean's house. James immediately got in touch with headquarters and forensics because there were a bunch of bodies in the place. Upon hearing this, Carlos ordered one of his guys to take out the cop. Carlos' men started firing blindly at James. The guy even checked the police car to make sure James was really dead. But James turned out to be alive and managed to take down Carlos' men. On the other side, Sean was still locked in a shootout with Carlos and his gang. Eventually, Sean decided to make a break for it through the window. This took their battle outside the house, with Sean and James facing off against Carlos and his men. Sadly, James lost his life in the skirmish, surrounded from all sides. So, Sean had to keep fighting solo, all while trying to protect Susan and Lauren. Sean realized that he was running low on ammo, so he told Susan to grab a car so he could make a getaway. Then, once they had a chance, Sean and his family wasted no time leaving their house. Seeing this, Carlos didn't sit still and immediately went after Sean, shooting at their car from behind. This made Sean furious, and he finally decided to bail out of the car. In a bold and brutal move, Sean wiped out all of Carlos' remaining men, sparing only Carlos himself, as he needed information. Sean then interrogated Carlos, using some harsh methods, until the guy spilled the beans about the location of his gang's base. With the info in hand, Sean wasted no time and shot Charlos in the head without any hesitation. He then told Susan and Lauren to find a safe place and contact the police if they could, while he made his way to the Los Mercenarios cartel's headquarters to rescue Lee. Before making a move, Sean got in touch with Max for backup. Max, being an adrenaline junkie, was more than eager to assist Sean. He even brought along a full set of weapons, knowing they'd be up against a lot of enemies. In the evening, they rendezvoused and eventually reached the vicinity of Garcia's headquarters. Sean observed Garcia, who appeared worried because his brother Charlos had met his end at Sean's hands. When Garcia let his guard down, Sean and Max started taking out the guards at Garcia's headquarters one by one. Surprisingly, they didn't seem to face much difficulty infiltrating the place, as if the terrifying reputation of the Los Mercenarios cartel didn't faze them at all. Then, once they got inside the base, they had to deal with a larger force armed with more powerful weapons. The battle intensified quickly. Hearing the gunfire, Garcia rushed to call for more backup. However, it was futile because Sean and Max had gone berserk, relentlessly taking down their opponents. After they'd had their fill of carnage, they stormed into Garcia's room, guns pointed at him. Sean's face was twisted with anger when he saw Garcia's unapologetic expression. At that time, Sean couldn't control himself and started beating Garcia until he bled. Yet he didn't kill him right away. He wanted Garcia to suffer first. Once Sean had had enough of the beating, he forced Garcia to lead them to where the kidnapped women were. When they arrived, Sean and Max proceeded with caution, unsure if Garcia had set a trap. To their surprise, there were guards waiting. Fortunately, Sean and Max swiftly dealt with them, taking down all the guards. In the end, Sean was reunited with Lee. Max suggested that Sean take Lee and her friend to safety while he would handle Garcia before delivering the final blow. Shockingly, Max hurt Garcia and displayed it on the streets of Juarez. In the end, Sean's family returned to a sense of normalcy, living peacefully as successful ranchers. And that's how the film came to an end. The moral lesson from this film is if your daughter was kidnapped, make sure to find her and punch the kidnappers.